Well, it's been quite a while since I've shared a video, close to a year now, and there's reason for that which I'll go into at another time. It was my intention that when I eventually started sharing again, my first video would be about my absence, but there's a lot to be said about that, and right now I just want to focus on where we are at the moment with everything that's going on in the world. This is a very difficult and challenging time for everyone, and there's a great deal of fear and uncertainty in regard to many things. And I'd like to see if I can't offer some clarity, perhaps some comfort or encouragement, although I can't make any promises. I'd also like to be able to speak from a place of fearlessness, but to be completely honest, I've also been experiencing my own share of fear and anxiety in all of this, which comes and goes. And perhaps we need to be reminded that fear is a very natural and healthy response to situations like these. It's essentially telling us to be cautious, and so we should listen to that and take whatever precautions we need to take. But once having done whatever is in our power to do to protect ourselves and one another, to keep ourselves healthy and safe, there's little use for fear. It has served its purpose and is no longer necessary, and yet, for many of us, we may find that it still lingers. A lot of our fear has to do with uncertainty concerning the future. It isn't always something specific that we're anticipating, but rather it's the not knowing what's going to happen next. There's indeed a great deal of uncertainty, and that can often be deeply unsettling. At the same time, however, there has always been uncertainty, even at times when everything seemed to be going quite well, when we didn't have a care in the world. We never know how all of that might suddenly change. It wasn't that long ago that we were living in such a way that everything occurring now was completely unexpected. We didn't see this coming, and we weren't quite prepared for it. So even then we were uncertain, but perhaps we just weren't as aware of it. And there is no certainty in regard to what is going to happen next, and that can be quite frightening. Of course, because we don't know what the future holds. It could go in any direction. Things could get worse, or things could get much better. Unfortunately, our tendency is to imagine the worst case scenario and to obsess on that. And that naturally creates a lot of fear in us, and that fear, of course, causes us to suffer. I'm reminded of something the philosopher Seneca once said, and I'm just paraphrasing, but what he essentially pointed out was that most of the things that we worry about never come to pass, and that even the things that do tend not to be as terrible as we imagine, and so we suffer more due to our imagination than to reality. And so it's important not only to understand this, but to continually bring our attention back to the present moment, rather than getting caught up in our fearful imagination. And when we do find our attention drifting off in such thoughts, we can simply be aware of this. We can notice how these thoughts create this disturbance in us, and we can begin to redirect our attention back to this present moment, perhaps taking a few slow, deep breaths, gently bringing the attention back to the here and now, watching the breath, noticing the various sensations in the body, listening to the sounds around us, just noticing whatever is happening right here in this moment, again and again, bringing our attention back to the here and now. At the same time, we also don't want to be constantly feeding the fear. It's important to remain informed in order that we take precautions. However, you may notice that the news tends to over-dramatize everything, and most of what they cover you could call bad news. And it's always been like this. They've always focused on the most negative things which they repetitively obsess about. And they do this because this is what grabs and holds people's attention. This is what gets them good ratings, but it also feeds a great deal of fear in those who watch. So it's important to limit how much news you take in. It's good to be informed, but we don't need to be watching it constantly. Give your attention to other things. In the current situation, there are certain things that we can do, certain precautions we can take to stay healthy and safe. But once we've done that, once we've done all that we can do, we can then give our attention to other things. There's another saying: when you can't control what's happening, challenge yourself to control the way you respond to what's happening. That's where your power is. There is always so much that is outside of our control, and again, it's always been this way. And sometimes we can get caught up worrying about all the things that we cannot control. And what good does this do us? It just creates all kinds of unnecessary anxiety. So instead, we can shift our energy to that which we can control. And the one thing that we always have control of is our response. How do we respond? So let's try to remain focused on what we can do rather than what we cannot do. If we've taken whatever precautions we need to take to stay healthy and safe, then what else is there to do? Right now, if you are being cautious, you're staying at home, only going out when absolutely necessary, and practicing social distancing when you do have to go out for groceries or what have you, washing your hands thoroughly and so on. Taking care of your health, eating well, getting lots of immune boosting foods and such. So here we are spending all this time at home, and what can we do with this time? How can we best utilize it? I think now is a good time to really focus on our spiritual practice, or to take up a new practice altogether, and primarily something along the lines of meditation or mindfulness practice. Again, it's all too easy to get caught up in fear and worry and panic, which is not very helpful and causes all kinds of unnecessary suffering. So whenever we begin to find ourselves drifting off into fearful imagination, we can recognize this and gently bring our attention back to the present moment, back to the breath, or whatever you find to be a useful anchor for your attention. Again and again, bringing the attention back to the present moment. This is what mindfulness practice means, that we're continually redirecting our attention here in the present moment. And as a result, much of the time, this helps us to relax, to remain calm and clear-headed. Now, I've often talked about how every situation in life, even and especially the most difficult ones, can be seen as opportunities for growth and awakening. And so the question becomes, how can I grow from this? What is this revealing to me? What opportunity can I find in this difficult situation? And it may be an opportunity to really tap into that inner strength and courage that we all have deep within us. To face our fear, to sit with it, to be present with it, to deepen our meditation practice, to keep coming back to our center, breathing into that space, into the stillness within, rather than being carried off in thought and imagination. I've also talked a great deal about solitude and the opportunities that it presents, opportunities for self-inquiry and reflection, introspection, mindfulness, spending time alone, getting to know oneself at a much deeper level, learning to embrace being alone, and discovering many of the things within us that we've been spending so much time and energy searching for outside of ourselves. Love, peace, contentment, compassion. It's important that we nourish these things, especially in times like these. And let's not think only of ourselves, but of everyone who is struggling in this moment. We're certainly not in this alone, even though we may be physically isolated from one another. So may we have compassion for those who may be frightened, or those without adequate resources, and those who may be ill. And may we also be grateful to all of those who are giving and serving others in this time. As I mentioned earlier, the news tends to focus a great deal on the negative, and we don't hear a lot of good news. But during times like this, there are many people who are giving their time and energy to helping others. There are people who are trying to make sure that others have food and other resources. There are people who are going out of their way to take care of one another, including strangers. There's a lot of compassion being expressed at this moment, and it's a very beautiful thing. that even in these difficult times, there are people coming out to assist one another in so many ways. Times like these can bring out the worst in some people and the best in others, and we can all choose which it will bring forth from us. Will it be selfishness and inconsideration, or will we be thoughtful and kind? So what I'd also like to see come from this is a greater sense of connection with others, a greater sense of compassion. Even though we're all practicing social distancing, and in some cases total isolation, we still have all this technology that connects us, and I would like to see us continuing to encourage one another, supporting and uplifting one another, sharing love and kindness and compassion with one another, sharing ideas and useful information on ways that we can move through this together, ways that we can be creative and productive and resourceful, and so on. A very destructive disease is spreading rapidly throughout our society and throughout the whole world, and that disease is fear. So in this time, may we spread calm and compassion. May we be bearers of good news. May we inspire others. May we encourage and uplift one another. Through social media, for example, we can share helpful information. We can share ideas on ways to be productive, creative, and resourceful. We can share our talents. We can share inspiring and encouraging news to counterbalance all the negative news that we're constantly bombarded with. We can share information on how to stay calm and centered, to maintain not only good physical health, but also mental well-being. So let's take this opportunity to help one another, to encourage and uplift one another, so that we all get through this together. And whatever happens, everything is always in a constant flux. Everything is always shifting and changing. That's simply the nature of things, that everything is transitory, impermanent. And this includes the most difficult situations. To speak metaphorically, every storm eventually passes. There comes a moment when the winds begin to still, the rain settles, the clouds part, and the sun comes shining through once again. There will always be storms in life, and every storm will pass. So even this very challenging time that we're going through will not last forever. And we have to stay reminded of this, that the sun will shine again. But in the meantime, we do have to cope with the darkness. We do have to take shelter from the storm. We do have to take precautions. We do have to do whatever we have to do to get through this. And part of that is staying centered, staying calm, continually coming back to that stillness within us, so that we don't get swept up in the whirlpool of fearful imagination. So find a mindfulness technique that works well for you, perhaps just focusing on the breath, and keep coming back to this moment, here and now. And may you find peace in this moment. May you be the calm within the storm. May you be a lamp for those who are lost in the darkness. May you be a source of courage and inspiration.